Hello, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Film London Jarman Award weekend, live online at the Whitechapel Gallery. I'm Greta Hewson, the production coordinator of Film London Artist Moving Image Network, or FLAMEN for short, who present the award. I hope you all had time to engage with Jenn Nkiru's film Hub Tones in the break, as it will be discussed in this portion of the event. If not, do not worry, as the link will be available for the film on the chat still, and it will be available to watch after the discussion portion of the event has finished. I'm so pleased to introduce shortlisted artist Jenn Nkiru, whose practice is grounded in the history of Black music and the aesthetics of experimental film and international art cinema, pushed through an Afro-surrealist lens. He will be in a conversation with the artist, multi-instrumentalist, researcher, radio presenter, composer, and the founder of Peckham Chamber Orchestra, Hannah Catherine Jones. Again, in this section, there's the opportunity to ask questions using the chat function, and we encourage you to do that throughout the entire presentation. You don't have to wait until the end. Thank you so much for being here. Hannah, Jenn, really appreciate you joining us this afternoon, evening. Over to you.
Thank you. Hi, Jenn.
Hi, Hannah.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good. A bit buzzy because this feels kind of, I know that there's people out there, we're kind of maybe using a different interface, but here we are to talk about your amazing body of work. I'm so happy to be having this conversation with you. And
Me too.
yeah, and congratulations on the nomination as well.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll start talking a bit about Hubtown, seeing as that's what the audience will have spent a little bit of time with. It's striking. It is beautiful, and I'm kind of interested in how you kind of got to that vision of the three women, and I guess I just want to kind of open it up by having a little general set the scene of how that vision came to be.
Sure. Just to say, I'm just so excited that we get to chat together today. I feel like it has been ages since we've been able to do this, so I'm really happy about that. So Hubtones. Okay, so firstly, that came out of a commission. So the jazz musician Kamasi Washington was releasing his albums Heaven and Earth, and he had asked me, along with a collective that I make work with called Chroma. We make work together to create a piece. And so this was the piece that I had made individually of that. And it was really interesting because it was a really beautiful process in that he was super into me taking like any track that I wanted on the albums and just making a piece out of. And at the time I had just done, a few months earlier, I had done a short film called Rebirth is Necessary. And there were so many approaches to film language that I was exploring and experimenting within that piece, and that I wanted to kind of extend that kind of explorations on. And so Hubtones, obviously, it's a Freddie Hubbard 1960s Freddie Hubbard track, and the music is doing it's sophisticated. The music is doing so much. And so I was thinking about what would be the perfect visual accompaniment to the rhythm of that. So that was one layer. It was a super multi-layered approach to how I was doing it. And then I was also thinking about ideas of Black interiority, like what is the visual embodiment of the Black interior? That's kind of like a general thing that my work tends to explore, which is why I guess if you're categorizing the work, people tend to put it within a framework of surrealism or Afro-surrealism. So the piece itself is all about transcendence, and it's all about the subtlety, the sensitivity of that moment of transcendence, you know? And so a lot of what is happening is very subtle. And I really wanted the process of that transference to be one that allowed the audience or viewer to feel very much inside the space of the person, you know, that we were focusing on. So you have three women, and the woman in the middle is kind of the point of the focus. She's the point of focus within the piece in terms of how it's composed. And you see her kind of go through those kind of like modes of transcendence. Now, the interesting thing is Kamasi was thinking a lot about Pan-Africanism in the piece in terms of the musicality of the piece. And then for myself, and we had this conversation after the fact, but it was funny how we came to these two spaces. He was thinking about Pan-Africanism as an African-American. I was thinking about modes of transcendence and ritual as it pertains to my Nigerian heritage. So I'm British Nigerian. And so there's a particular, in my tribe, there's a particular ritual, I won't say ritual, but particular kind of calling towards a spiritual realm that we do, which is called a boni. And what happens is there's typically someone playing music, and with every kind of like changing tone of that music, you get closer and closer to that spiritual realm, to the extent by the end you are essentially left here only like materially, you know, physically. Everything else is kind of like in conversation with this spiritual realm. And so I really wanted to conjure that, almost create some sort of a seance, as it were, between spirit and actual, and thinking about ideas of the ecstatic, Black ecstatic as well. And so you see all that happening in the piece. And then in terms of the elements that I'm placing in the piece, there was a lot going on. I was calling on like Amiri Baraka's Nation Time. I was calling on Nina Simone with the jeweled embellishment in the women. I was calling on Islam with the presence of green. I was calling on very, very subtly through the lighting design, the court hearings of Anita Hill that took place in the 70s. And so or 80s. So that's kind of like the mode in which I came into that. And it's done quite of an action.
I feel that as a, I don't really want to say viewer. I like to kind of think of it as absorption, you know? It's such a kind of powerful image or series of images. And for me, as someone who is always thinking about language and thinking about the connections and how we name things, because the Pan-Africanist is there in so many different ways. Obviously the colours, the sash, and then it's one shot, one take, and it's panning. And I was just kind of like, it was, it felt almost spherical. And I think that is kind of, you know, this multi-layered approach is really the only way we can attempt to represent the, you know, the multitude, the enormity, the immeasurability of Blackness. And that was something that really kind of came through for me, was the ritual. Of course, we're distanced by screen, but there was a moment where every flicker of the eyelid, every kind of moment, and then the difference at the end where the eyes open, and there's this kind of like, you know, we have just been through something above and beyond. But I also really enjoy the dialogue between that I guess visionary kind of, you know, you realizing that vision and how it dialogues with a quote from Black to Techno, the Black static cannot be contained. I really love how the push and pull, because of course just because something's impossible doesn't mean we might not try. And in a way, you've kind of you have done it, you have captured it, and I really enjoy the kind of contradiction that exists across there, because I think that's very real. I think that's I think there's probably a number of things that have got to happen for that performance, that moment, that ritual to happen. And I wonder what, so how did you work with the protagonists in the video, and how did they how did you introduce them to the music, or how did you direct, if at all, like emotionally once?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very like in terms of my process and how I work, I'm really concerned with, like, there's a quote that I mentioned a lot from Maya Angelou, which I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with, which is people forget what you say, what you did, but people never forget how you made them feel. So my work tends to be concerned less about exactness, and it's more concerned with feeling and creating work that tries to shift us beyond the moment that we're in conversation with it, right? So how do I create that kind of like lingering attachment to the work, or create allow for the work to have a presence beyond that kind of actual and very kind of live experience with it. And so when I was working with the women, we really were talking about feeling, and we were talking about connection to self, and we were talking about, we're talking about femininity, feminine energy, we're talking about womanhood, we were talking about, these are all kind of things we were talking about, but at the same time, these weren't like labored conversations. These weren't like conversations with an intention to have an answer.
You were hanging out, you were sharing space with each other, I imagine.
Yeah, just like, exactly, we were just, sharing space. And then it's more so, I always talk about, a lot of what we do, we're chemists, sometimes there's like filmmakers and artists, all these things are, on some level chemical. It's all energetic, it's all chemical. And so what you're essentially doing are, nurturing the space with the right, right energy and the right chemicals to allow for things to happen. So it was funny actually, because this thing was shot in the last 10 minutes of our shoot day, and anyone who's like, making film at a commercial level, you realize that, like, if you go over, I think it was like 11:51 p.m. If you go over like midnight, you go into the next day, and it means you start paying everybody double time. So we literally had like 9 minutes to shoot it, because we had done like 3 films that day. We shot like 3 films in one day. And so when we started it, I think I just remember from memory, I wish I had this documented, but I remember like saying to my team, like, just turn the music up like supremely loud, like super, super loud. And then, so the music was blaring really loud. And I was like to the women, like, with everything we've kind of gone through, and said, just feel it out. And so what would happen is I could see where their bodies were, like, in what directions their bodies were moving. And then I would push towards, there might be certain call outs I might give, where it's like, okay, like, stay there, don't go down, don't go low, if you're, and also there's something around temporality, and rhythm and space I wanted to really focus on. So you see the women, they are all in the same physical space, but their interpretation or conversation with the space is different. So all women are so different. So once you pull out and you see the woman in the front, it's like, whoa, she's having a different, experience with this energy to the woman who's like, in the back. And so that's like something I really wanted to pull on. And I really, and people say that the devil is in the details. For me, God is in the details. It's like that kind of level of, or spirit is in the details, I should say. Like, there's that kind of level of like sensitivity and change that I was really concerned with wanting to capture, because oftentimes when we are working with visual mediums, the changes the changes have to be so loud, you know, they have to be so big for you to realize, and for it to, you know, for the audience to essentially understand them, you know, or feel them. But with this, there's a certain temporality, and it was super, super, super subtle. And so I shot it with Benoit Soler, who he and I is a great collaborator of mine, and we shot a few things together. And I just said to him, like, I think I was between the women and then between him, and I was like, okay, stay there, stay there, stay there, hold the tambourine there. And I was like, Benoit, I was like, push him, pull out, hold. So it became quite, it felt like, you probably know this, I felt like a conductor.
Yeah, I was just
like an orchestra. You know?
I was just thinking that exact thing, where you're trying to, you know, channel the energy of that person at that moment, but without kind of disrupting them from doing what they're doing.
Yes.
So you have to, it's all about like tone of voice or breath for the conductor. Like, so often, if I want people to play loud and we've just gone from somewhere quiet, I'll be like, bam, you know, so they'll hear my music and that will know. Or the register, it's slightly different, obviously, in this sense where you, the conductor, we can't see, but it's always like, everything outside that frame is kind of like you're kind of conjuring, let's say, like out of the interaction of the women and the music and the space. It's, I guess, for me, it very much radiates a sense of ritual and a sense of togetherness. You can kind of feel the community, let's say, which is something that's super, super, super important. And I was struck by something that I remembered from, because obviously I've rewatched Black to Techno a couple of times, and I've been listening to techno all day just to kind of be in a different kind of rhythm or a different kind of BPM of that which I would normally listen to. But I was thinking about Onyx Ashanti, who features in Black to Techno, because I was aware of his work, but so he's an amazing musician who I'm not even entirely sure how to paraphrase or describe what he does, but it's essentially a synthesis of his own body creations, technological wizardry into gloves and helmets and wearable. It's kind of like this collapse of the person and the rhythms and the sounds and the synthesis. But something that he said in a TED Talk that really, I think, speaks to what you're doing, and I feel like a lot of people are doing this, which is creating the context on the scale of you working with those three incredible women in Hubtones and interacting with them, getting to know their essence so they can best, that can shine. And then on a bigger level, kind of creating a context which is like, it feels very much so like it's your world building. And we need to go more into that. But this context that's been created, I'm thinking in every sense, right from sharing a meal and having a conversation with people, right up until distribution, but creating that context. And I wonder if that kind of, does that kind of, maybe we could just talk a bit about that. Kind of,
For sure. I feel like it's interesting, like you're saying this, because I think for me personally, what it speaks to is really process, isn't it? And I think that we've all been, we've been told, for a long time what process is supposed to look like, right? And how, if it doesn't have those elements, maybe it doesn't have space to be considered process. So a lot of like the world building, like you're mentioning, that we're doing is all coming out of these processes that are really just different, and make sense to, for example, someone like myself, what I'm doing. So, really thinking about, for me, it's really thinking about what is it that I want to create, and what system, I have issue with the word system, but what kind of like process, you know, can allow for that thing to be the best version of itself, right? And so oftentimes when I am thinking about the work I'm making, that also spills into the fact that I'm not thinking about the work representationally, you know, in terms of, okay, I want to create a piece where I see three women and they're moving and they're going through this space of transcendence. Yes, it's one thing, you know, to kind of see three women doing this, you know, but it's something else to now, how do we infuse into the process that feeling so that when it comes to the making of or the moment of creation, I don't end up being, as a director, you know, I don't end up being so central to it, you know. So a lot of, I say all that to say, like, a lot of, I'm very concerned with a lot of the work being done beforehand, you know, like, and as I mentioned the term chemistry before, like creating the right energy, because I always say I only, you know, I know it sounds redundant, but I only know as much as I know, right? And I don't ever want to, my role, I always say to you, I'm at peace with my ego. So my role is not for the thing to be exactly how I've seen it only. For me, my role is how do I create the space so that this thing can be the best version that it could be. And hopefully that can sometimes be something outside of even my wildest dreams, you know? And that's what allows for, you know, things like that. And then you mentioned like Onyx Ashanti, it's that kind of like same kind of mindset towards creation. Like, how does the convergence of all these things met with the wisdom, meaning knowledge and time of what I know, how does that affect, you know, how does that affect how we're doing things? How does that affect how, you know, we're making visual work or how we're making music for, say, someone like Onyx? So yeah, it all boils down to experimentation and opening myself up to process. Because I did a talk recently with a psychologist who's also a writer, and he was talking about, and I was talking to him about, it was about four of us, we were all talking about Afrofuturism. But within this conversation, I was talking to him about how, as an artist, I'm beginning to look back on earlier works and only come into certain realizations now about the works. And he was talking about, no, that's what, that is that. And I was saying to him that, you know, it's interesting how my process has landed that way. And he said, you know, that's the role of the subconscious on that level, right? Like, if we're truly, as artistic individuals, wanting to have this conversation with our thoughts, our feelings, and all these things, it's okay, you know, for the order of process to be outside of what traditionally, you know, people think. And which is why, you know, when you see dancers, that's why I love dance, and that's why I love choreography and movement, because they are working the thing out in real time, you know, and, you know, and there's something so sacred and special and intimate about that. And so I do tend to use dance and choreography a lot within my work, and even on a, you know, on a level, on a figurative level. I think that's kind of like another thing that I'm interested in process-wise. How do we create the right convergence to allow for things to happen, you know? So yeah.
And there's so much in that. I mean, intuition is such a big concept for me, and it's something that seems to be not really recognized. I mean, obviously I'm coming from a largely academic place, especially now as I'm in the final couple of months of my PhD, so, you know, hectic times. But intuition is something it's never really valued as much as, you know, scientific fact. And that's not to say that, you know, speaking to a psychiatrist is hugely important, if only to confirm some of the things that we think we know, and that we know more than anything. We are our bodies, and we know what is happening to an extent. I mean, the thing that I latch onto based on a kind of psychology really is the fact that we're 97% subconscious. Like, as a kind of general rule, it's tip of the iceberg in terms of what we absorb and transmit. And I think that something I end up doing quite a bit in my own work is kind of what you've said, is realizing that I've said something that I haven't been able to put into words, but maybe it's happened through images, or maybe it's happened through a cut or a transition that I wasn't fully aware of what that juxtaposition meant until afterwards. And then I think the really exciting thing about world building for me, I don't know, maybe because like I'm a bit of a fangirl, and maybe because I've been doing some rewatching in order for us to kind of be able to talk freely today, but becoming more aware of what those things are, and I guess like being in a position to discover what you're already saying, and also to discover where the dialogues lie between yourself and Alice Coltrane and Onyx Ashanti and Sun Ra and Juan Atkins, and like, what I mean? It's kind of like these dialogues happen between ourselves, between I feel it with a lot of my friends artists, between you and I, for example, who haven't actually seen each other that much, but we have so closely in dialogue in terms of what we have been spending our time doing, thinking, and of course the way that one thing I miss so much about pre-pandemic world is the bumping into that music. Because I was just actually thinking about, because I went to see the Heaven and Earth tour at Brixton Academy. And it was insane. And his dad came out and was playing flute, and Thundercat came out, and it was like it's kind of like what you're saying about the process of uptones. You can feel the connection, you can feel the community, you can feel we are the ancestors. And it makes me think of I am the plant, I am the seed, I am the power. I'm quoting, it's these kinds of dialogues, and I think it's super exciting when an artist like yourself kind of just explodes them, like, or our minds kind of are this little actually there's nothing little about our minds are this they're firing out vibrations like a radio, but it like Sun Ra talks about these. I've got this book open here, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
All right. The poem's called Every Thought is Alive, and the first lines are, because every thought is a mental force or mental vibration, therefore it is a living being.
Yes.
I mean, so we know that we're kind of sending out these patterns, and it's kind of like, I don't know, little moments in Black to Techno, like there's this, obviously it's so rich, but there's this moment where you kind of it's the host of I can't remember his name, he's got like the platform, and just starts talking about the mothership, and then in the background I can hear just the tiniest bit, maybe it's even slowed down, of Strauss from Thus Spoke Zarathustra, that's used in Space Odyssey 2001, the epic, and I think it's the first chord, and then there's the constellation, and then it cuts, and for me it's almost like as somebody who struggles, I guess, a lot to unlearn and grapple with the process that we have been taught, the classical, the kind of ancient Greek patterns of grammar and rhetoric and this, and I think that there's something really masterful about that. How it reads to me is like, this history exists, and I'm going to quote it, but then I'm going to change the channel to where it actually needs to be. We're going to go there, and that's where the time. That's where we spend our time. I'm not really asking you questions. I'm just
it's so cool. No, it's making my mind race, because it's like, it's so funny, like something I realized about myself recently. It's so funny, at my big age, I need to realize this now. It's like I literally respect and learn things to be able to demolish them, in terms of these things. It's like I want to respect, fields of study or practice enough to understand them so I can break them apart. But not destruction for the sake of destruction to reconstruct in a way that feels more attuned to my subconscious and my intuition, So it can be, that's a very micro interpretation, because I'm relating it directly to myself. But on a macro level, it's if you think about the state of our world today, it's very much that. It's like, it's not that. I hope it will be that eventually, which is that we understand that there is a framework here that on some level works, but on many levels does not, and how can we, address some of these things on a frequential level, so it's more in time and in servitude to ourselves. And so I think what I'm doing a lot, something I kind of have my leg in and out of scholastic academia thoughts, processes and studies. So I will dip in, I'll dip out, I'll dip in, I'll dip out. And I really have, I've always respected intuition in the same way you would respect institutionalized like studying or knowledge or learning. And so in my mind and in my practice and in how I work, I'm putting them, very much, on the same kind of level as each other. It's very much why in Black to Techno, I wanted to put extracts from radio shows. I wanted to put, it's quite, I guess on some level, quite anthropological on that level, put extracts of radio shows, put extracts of like voice notes, ask people to send me, put extracts of, having individuals from the academy come and give like, thoughts on their areas of studies as it relates to what I was, doing, having people on a musical level, kind of come in and inform that. So you've literally got like real colloquial, like British accents, like opening this piece through to like, someone saying, my mom used to say, she used to go, first-hand accounts through to, people from, as I say, the academy with all these, sharing their thoughts. So I really wanted to create a convergence of knowledge, that I'm aware of and I know exists in this kind of like broader constellation, but you seldom see in conversation with each other, like you mostly see those within the academy in conversation with those in the academy. You see musicians generally in conversation with musicians and, and so forth, And so I really wanted to create something that just kind of broke that apart. And I think I am very, very intuitively, but also very consciously too, like trying in my pieces of works to break form, and trying to break form to see how far this thing can be pushed and to see how we can bend things, to experience all these things under the sun that are not new in new ways, That's kind of like my general kind of like broad kind of like ethos is like, how do we see differently, and how does seeing differently, feeling differently, hearing differently, how does that spark, how does that spark our imagination? Because I realize my work is primarily directed to adults. And, kids, when it comes to imagination, they're easy, they're so brilliant. They just kind of, they don't need too much of a stimulus and they're there, like imagination-wise. With adults, we're so entrenched in our ways and we're so overly socialized and overly institutionalized that, it becomes sometimes a struggle, when you're teaching or showing adults to kind of have us think, outside of, our kind of comfortable framework of thinking. And so in this kind of like coalescence or like jostling of all these things together, I'm trying to spark imagination.
Well, I mean, it's very much you inviting us into your imaginative world, and it speaks to me on so many different levels. And thinking about levels and hierarchies and this and that, like the equalizer desk of the the mixing desk. This idea of it's something I do within my like writing or radio, in dialogue, in people voice notes, different sound qualities, kind of just because you find yourself where it's like, I need to record this, and I ain't got my shotgun mic, I haven't got this, I haven't got my Tascam, but we've always got a phone, so it's kind of like accepting, leaning into these different shifts in quality as like just a real essence of what they are. It's like kind of what that means. It means something that it was recorded on a phone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then what the kind of, I guess, post-production element is this equalization. And you know, I've got Ra on the brain today, but he doesn't talk about in fact I think I'm gonna start calling Sun Ra they, because you know, Ra had so many selves and did not really. So I'll just I'm gonna call Ra they, or just Ra. But what was I talking about? Yeah, Ra's not a philosopher. Ra is somebody who's dealing with equations. So I feel like it's I take a lot from this world view of studying Sun Ra, because it's not someone that I've ever studied, but Ra is like equivalent. Like, if we're world building, then Ra is kind of like, and I don't even like doing this because it's again relating back to things that we're trying to step away from, but is Ra like Zeus or someone? And then like I don't know, like how do we position ourselves in the myths that we give weight to, and the information and the I guess the storytelling that we pass along, which, you know, there's been a lot said about, oh well, you know, clearly this person was born in Birmingham, Alabama on May 22nd, 1913, but it's like, okay, we accept that person appeared on Earth then, but it's not about whether or not it's true. It's about what it means. It's about what it means. And I think there's a lot of self-prophesizing going on with Sun Ra, but there's also this this commitment to the intuition of the imagination that is empowering. And I'm mentioning Ra a lot just because you know, I'm thinking of rebirth is necessary, and and for me there is this kind of godlike, Ra is a god, but you know, godlike in a mythological sense, in terms of world building, the points that we refer back to, and equalization. And I guess I've kind of lost my train of thought, Jen.
No, your train is on.
It's chugging away. I don't know where it's going. Let me try and bring this back round. I mean, thinking there's so much in Black to Techno that you know, kind of blows my mind. And oh my God, I remembered what I was going to say. At the very beginning, there's a moment where there's a memory. It's the very beginning of we used to name our machines, and naming the machine Ginny. And I was very, very struck by that, as the imagery of, you know, the and like enslaved or indentured or whatever. I don't know when that what to refer to it, but certainly you know, the aftermath of the Atlantic enslavement. And then this idea that people so dehumanized would then put humanity onto the machine, and as a kind of triumph of, like, or not triumph, but like this beauty of human spirit that would respond to being dehumanized with an extraordinary amount of empathy towards the machine. And I was moved by that, and I was thinking, it doesn't matter whether or not that anecdote, which was just so well framed, that the one time you put your hand there, the machine didn't crush it, and that's what it's about. And I'm like, it doesn't matter where that comes from. It's what it's making me think of. It's what it's making me appreciate. And these are the kinds of things I'm talking about in terms of myths. It's more about, like, what information are we passing down to one another, and what stays with you in the work, because there are so many things that stay with me in that work. And I'll just jump to another. There's a moment, actually, it's more towards the end, and it's about frequencies, and it's the baby.
Yes.
The baby. And you hear the frequencies in the background do something to me. And just to kind of, I guess, because you know how I am with puns, but it's something I think about all the time. So, like, the baby crying, so it's like Lacan talks about it as I'm going to try and do my best French accent. Uncri pour, P-O-U-R. Uncri P-U-R, pure. So it's a cry for someone, and at the same time, round in a circle, it's the purest scream of the infinite. And it did something to me, and it also absolutely, because it's towards the end of the film, and it then makes me want to go back to Rebirth, and it's this cyclical dialogue of things that stay with me, that, you know, this is what I'm talking about with the world building. There's like all these moments that are very much emotive, like it's reaching out of the screen to you and saying, like, you will remember this is moving you. And yeah, you know how my questions work. So I'm just gonna stop talking.
No, I love this, it's so refreshing. No, it's oh god, you said so much goodness. It's what it is, you know, in terms of like what you're saying about the world building aspect of it. I think, you know, oftentimes, like, as a filmmaker, you know, people, I mean, even as filmmakers, like, sometimes we can be so focused on the visual, you know, and I really, you know, I always say I respect people's time in that I don't ever want to make an 11-minute long film if it could be 10 minutes and 55 seconds, to be honest. And what I mean by that is that I want, you know, viewers to be drenched and drunk in like this alternate space. And I want people to feel like they've entered a different dimension, a different realm when they're watching the work. And what allows for that to potentially happen is, how do we make this as experiential and as sensorially charged as possible? And it's very much that, like, thinking about or trying to, you know, I'm a lover of music. I'm not a student of music. I can't read it, I can't play it. I would love to, but I can't right now. You know,
you know music. You know music in the way that a musician. Yeah, sorry to cut you there.
No, not even that. Because it's like, even like you're saying, it's fine. It's like it goes back to the leniency of the instinctual, you know, and it goes, you know, and it goes back to given the level of credence to academic thought that I would give to the instinctual. So whilst, yes, I'm sure, because I'm ignorant of, there is a very likely, in some of my works in Black to Techno, there is a very likely musical technique that is going on there. Ignorantly, I don't know what that is. I know what the feeling is, though. So I'm constantly driving towards the feeling and trying to match that. So even with that theme with the baby, it's so funny because I bring a lot of my dreams into my work. It was a dream I had. I had a dream of this baby floating on top of a sound system in the Atlantic, and the child was just like wailing. It was oh goodness, even when I think about it, it gives me chills. And so I wanted to bring it. It's so funny how when I was making this piece, it became, I don't know, it kept coming back to me in my mind's eye. And so when we did it, I remember even with that baby, she's so beautiful. It was like the first the first take of, I think we did 3, and the first take, she just kind of like got into it. And it's I guess I'm being really divergent now, but like there is something very, especially even with babies, there's something that hits us on a very kind of like primal level, you know? And there's an aspect of, even, there's certain things that can really, how do I say? There's certain aspects of our primalness that we've kind of let go of, you know, that I feel could be so channeled properly, could be so incredibly important for us. And there was something on as you mentioned, no one has mentioned this to me before that picked up on it, but on that kind of like frequential level of the crying, you know, and how you hear that over the voiceover of what the person's saying. Like, again, this kind of like convergence of different things that are not typically done the way I'm doing them, but I know it's like baking, isn't it? It's like, you know, yes, people use flour, egg, water, but depending on how you're charging that with heat and with other elements, it creates a different thing, you know? And I guess I'm I'm experimenting on that level in terms of experimenting towards my subconscious feelings and drives, you know, in terms of like what is affecting me, in the hope that what affects me on a particular way can on some level affect others as well. So yeah.
I mean, there were so many things around that moment in the video with the baby, but one thing that it spoke directly back to within Black to Techno was the quote, it's the silences in between, it's the space between the beats. And
yeah.
then, I think it's, you know, we were chatting about the kind of missing kind of you know, it's laid out beautifully in the film, but I've been reflecting since we had a chat and thinking about what that meant to me, because it affects us on a molecular level, I think, because of the frequency of the baby's cry. Like whatever pattern of airwave sound patterns that means, I think it does something to everyone, because it is like, yeah, it's primal and it's pure, so it needs something, but it needs us to protect it or to help it. And then you know, we're talking about all that absence, those things that we can't quite like grasp, the lost kind of histories and the absences that are maintained structurally within academia, which hold it doesn't value experience in the same way that it absolutely did back in the day.
Yes.
But not in a time where we can remember. But this absence, and then for me personally, like, because I've been reflecting as much as possible and finding within myself the I don't even know what the right word is. The strength, the active curiosity to have some difficult conversations with family members, actively related or distantly so, people that we meet, like this ancestral kind of knowledge passing that there seems to be, as we were discussing, like this kind of, and is in so present in the film. There's this kind of gap, this kind of like sorrow that often pours out of me, especially when I'm improvising, and how we can kind of, I think a lot of these images do a lot, because the first thing I was thinking about was my dad coming over by himself as a little boy.
Yeah.
Like, not necessarily a baby, but as a baby. And like, I think a lot of us of like this generation, you know, there's a lot of trauma around what has happened, and it's still not openly being talked about enough. And I genuinely feel as though subliminally or otherwise, your art is kind of like, it's coaxing us to kind of, because I'm you know what I mean? It's like bringing us into that dream, and then reaching out and touching us and saying, and then we take away whatever that is, whether it is just a heightened awareness. We don't know how it transfigures into how we then talk and move through and try and kind of reach for a sense of wholeness, which is maybe a myth in general, like, but it's certainly something that that I feel like we're ever like searching or reaching for.
It's interesting. No, it's cool. No, it's interesting, because I think a lot of times what I'm trying to do is go beyond identity politics. You know, there is obviously a very superficial sense of engaging with identity politics, you know, and I'm really, which is why I'm, as I said, even at the top, like, I'm more so concerned with interiority, you know, because I think that's when things become, you start to engage with things on a level that are a lot more human and a lot more dynamic, you know. And so, you know, with my work, you know, it's very much that, you know, like, how do I, you know, my work is primarily focused on people, topics, ideas that have an African grounding in it, you know? And so I'm very much interested in, beyond the very imposed ideas of what Blackness is, on a political level, I'm trying to go back to source. I'm the diving of history goes beyond, the last 400-500 years. That's very recent history. I'm really concerned with old history. Like, I'm concerned with, and when I say, I should be more explicitly clear. When I say I'm more concerned with older history, I'm more concerned with those elements, whether they be spiritual, whether they be actual, that figured into how we transverse through this world. Like, what is, focus on those things, but then also like on how do I amplify and transfer really quotidian aspects of life. So what, something as quotidian as like sitting and thinking, how can that be transformed, on a spiritual level, as the quotidian idea of like listening to music? How can that be transformed, visually in a way that is channeling something that helps us realize that this existence that we have in this one planet, in this world, is but a part of a larger conversation, So I guess when I am speaking about Blackness, or not speaking, but when I am exploring ideas of Blackness or Africanness, I'm not looking at it from an identity category. I'm trying to transform it beyond that and look at it as a category from one which is, Sunrise said as well, one that is related to spirituality, and how does that understanding, that broader understanding, kind of give us a sense of groundingness in the here and the now. So I tend to talk a lot about a term I coined called cosmic archaeology, which is in the histories, her stories, they stories of the, of the world, everything we are aware of, whether we're finding it in books, whether we're finding it on archaeological excavations, these are not tellings of these are not holistic tellings of the full story, right? These are just clues, basically. And so what I'm doing with a lot of what I'm exploring is all these fragments. This is the archaeological side of the cosmic archaeology of it. All these fragments that I'm picking up, whether it be, again, placing everything on the same level, whether it be intuition, whether it be academia, whether it be lived experience, whether it be taste, whether it be feeling, taking all these things, bringing them together, and then thinking about, okay, what is the story that I'm figuring from all this, right? Or what are the patternings that are appearing from seeing all these things together? That is a lot of what I'm doing. And then the cosmological side of it is where, I'm bringing spirit into that, and really thinking about, ourselves as a species, as a human race, thinking about ourselves as an entity that is in conversation with the universe and in conversation with all the things around us. So, yeah.
It's like there's so much there. Of course there is, but it's like the thing that I was kind of explaining in relation to my work. Excuse me, in terms of inaudible musics and audible musics, as in whether you know about it or not, there are other worlds, and everything has a resonance, and the kind of those vibrations go out there, and something happens. And then the way that you're describing cosmic archaeology as a process of how it helps you or not how it helps you, because it feels like it's one of those things that it's like you've named what that process is as you're doing it. It's not like you're like how do I coin a term? It's like, okay, these words, like, because I'm kind of throwing a bit of shade at academia in general at the moment, because I'm like refusing to coin a term. I'm like, I make up words all the time, but I'm not doing it for you. Anyway, I like to think of my, like, where I'm in this final stage of the PhD, it's like what's his name? Ptolemy, the guy that discovered was like, okay, this one's a scorpion. And it's almost like you the stars are there, and you can just pick out the ones that are like making this form. And it's like just amping those ones up, and it's like this is so, you know. And I think that when we talk about imagination, and I know we've had Sun Ra kind of beaming down on us throughout this. But this I think, you know, the whole crux of Afrofuturism, you know, that word, or Afro-surrealism, is so linked to, you know, the way that we are pitted against the dominant powers, or the overwhelming hegemonic kind of monolith of Western culture everywhere in the world, and how people are having to lean towards that, be it through you know, losing languages, because you'll send a letter in one language and you'll get a response back in English to the government. I know that's going on in a few countries all over the place, especially in West Africa. And and I'm thinking that this pull towards the cosmic it feels like there's so many different ways that it manifests, but certainly in process. And I think that it's the only way that we can really, or I feel like I can really think beyond the constraints of what's going on day to day. And for me, I'm like super interested in Pluto, you know. I like to think of Pluto and its moons as this kind of queer community, and they've been like accepted into the planet world and then rejected again, and then there's this and this is where I think, like, I get really excited, and I can tell, you know, this realm where we have artists speaking to different people, artists speaking to musicians, speaking to scientists, speaking to psychiatrists, because back in the day, across so many different places in so many cultures, like musician, medic, magician were the same person. Or you would be learning maths, music, geometry, and astrology, because they were all linked together. And I think that there's, because of everything that's going on, and of course, like the fact that outer space is already being colonized, it's this idea of how can I kind of approach a body of matter or entities that is so far out, that hasn't been named that recently, that gives me an opportunity to think about how I would name or kind of create something if we weren't here where we are now, with all this kind of history and this experience, and then muddled in with lots of denial and kind of you know, ignorance, if you know what I mean. But just that was me just commenting on your cosmic archaeology and just being my usual rambling self. But just to kind of say that I think, like, intoxication was definitely the word when you were saying you want people to be drunk. And that is the ecstatic as well, and that is also so ritualistic, because it's like I can speak for myself, but clearly a lot of people feel the same, that these images stay with you and they are intoxicating. And that, again, with what you've been talking about in terms of subconsciousness, that's the power of the process of shifting how we think about ourselves. And that is, for me, like the joy. And also, I've shed tears as well, the baby. That's it. It's oscillating between, so, you know.
I'm looking at the time now.
I know, I was like, yeah. It's bang on 6 o'clock there.
Yeah.
That's weird that. I was just like,
I know.
Did I yak on too much in the last
Not
minute?
even. I think was there like not a question, but it was a comment.
Yeah. Oh, comment. Oh, there it is. I can see. Comment from the chat. I'm just reading from the chat here. Perhaps in reaching, we are reaching for ourselves and one another as folks of the diaspora. Thanks so much for this dialogue, Harry. I mean, that's it.
Oh, yeah.
That's beautiful.
It is. You know, like a lot of us in the diaspora, we're dealing with, on a very critical level, we're dealing with displacement. You know, there's a sense of destitution, you know, like with ourselves. And so even in the film, I just sum up, you know, by saying this, even in the film, like the ideas around the missing, the unknown unknowns, you know, there's a void that we know we want to be filled, but we don't know what we don't know what the thing in that void is going to be, but we know it's a missing, you know, it's a missing from us. Yeah, I'll stop because we could go on forever.
We could go on forever, couldn't we? And we will continue.
Yeah, we'll continue for sure.
Yeah. Sure. I don't know what happens now. I'm like,
no.
Are we still on the internet?
I'm not sure.
Okay, cool. Jen, thank you so much. Honestly, joy chatting to you. You know, blessed.
I'm excited, and I'm excited for your work.
Me too.
And I'm excited for everything you're doing and gonna be doing. And
me too. You know, it's like I feel, you know, very much we are part of. You know, having these conversations is super important, and I feel very grateful.
Likewise.
Okay. Well, I guess we say bye. I don't know if
say bye.
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 Yeah. Do we stay here? Is it offline?
I don't know.
Host has stopped your video.
Okay, cool. Yeah, me too.
Thank you so much, Jenn and Hannah, for that wonderful conversation. If you haven't yet seen Hubtones, do have a look. It's available via the YouTube link that's in the chat and linked below on the Whitechapel page. Thank you also to Michelle Williams Gamaker, Krishna Ista and Taranjit Manda, and Tim Corrigan and Kate Adams from Project Artworks, who presented earlier today. Unfortunately, that brings us to the end of our programme for today. I've just got a few, wrapping up comments to make. I wanted to say thank you to Sam Williams, Chris Penty and Jane Scarth from the Whitechapel, who are behind the scenes working on this event with the Flamin' team. Thank you so much for all of your help. And thank you so much to our fantastic audience for joining us for this event. It's been a really great day. And we hope to see you back here tomorrow from 2 p.m. to hear from Hannah Quinlan and Rosie Hastings, Larissa Sansour, and Andrea Luka Zimmerman. The winner of the Film London Jarman Award will be announced in a special online presentation at 5 p.m. on the 24th of November. And we really hope that you guys will join us for that because it's going to be very exciting. And of course, the films by the shortlisted artists are available on the Whitechapel website until midnight tomorrow night. So if you haven't had a chance to check those out, please do. I hope you all have a fantastic evening and thank you so much for joining us. See you tomorrow.